Good evening. I've got an extra special Fireside tale for you. I won't call it a fairy tale because it's stories from ancient Greece. And so these relate to the myths and religious tales of ancient Greece and Rome. Also, unusually, typically when I do these, I wait till everyone's gone to bed so it's nice and quiet. But it's such a lovely evening. It's one of the first proper spring evenings here in England. And so my kids and the neighbor kids are running around and giggling and enjoying the beautiful evening. And I feel that that's appropriate because the stories I want to tell you are about the goddess Artemis. And Artemis was a goddess who loved to be outdoors. She was almost never indoors if she could help it. And she was a goddess who looked after children, especially girls. And it just so happens that all the children on my street here are girls. So I think that she would have approved of this slightly noisier than usual atmosphere. And I hope you enjoy it too. I guess we should also pay tribute to the Greek goddess Hestia, since we're sitting by the fire. And as usual, I have my trusty marshmallow stick. So for the first time in more than 50 years, human beings have left Earth's gravity, and they're once again exploring space. And this is personally very exciting to me because I come from, my grandfather worked for NASA, and he helped supervised the construction of all kinds of aircraft, and the crowning glory of his career was he supervised the construction of the space shuttle Columbia. So I grew up hearing so many amazing stories about all the wonderful development that went on in the 1960s and 70s. And this is so exciting, and it's proof that human beings can do wonderful things if we just choose to. The world can seem like a crazy place, but it's so nice to have this moment of happiness and unity that we can look at. So Artemis II, as I record this, is out in space, and it did the orbit past the moon, and it's helping to build up to Artemis IV when human beings will once again walk on the moon, hopefully in 2028. So why is this program called Artemis at all? You might wonder about that. And Artemis was an ancient Greek goddess, as I said. She's the goddess of the moon, childhood, childbirth, hunting, wild animals, and the wilderness itself. And she was later known to the Romans as Diana. She's the daughter of Zeus and the Titaness Leto. And unlike most of Zeus's relationships, this one was actually consensual, thank goodness. She conceived twins, and Hera was very typically jealous. And I almost don't understand. Look, I get it. Hera is the goddess of marriage and fidelity and all of that. But it's like, you knew what you were marrying. You're not going to change him. He's not going to change his behavior for you. So either deal with it or don't marry the guy. Anyway, so these twins were Artemis and Apollo. And Artemis is the older goddess. She's been around for at least 3,000 years. And Apollo was added later on. First, they described him as Artemis's sibling. And then in later stories, he became her twin. Now, they're very different in some ways, and they're very similar in other ways. Apollo represented civilization, learning, the arts. He hung out with the muses. He invented the lyre. And Artemis was completely the opposite. She represented the wild, the untamed world, the uncivilized, and how nature was beautiful, but very, very fierce and dangerous. And both of them, though, were guardians of children. Apollo looked after boys, and Artemis looked after girls. And she especially looked after those on the verge of puberty and protected girls from the menacing of men. Unwanted male attention was something that she definitely had a big problem with. And she's famous for punishing men who get out of line with girls who do not want their attentions. Eventually, these twins got conflated with Helios, the sun god, and Selene, the moon god, and took over their duties, carrying the sun and moon around the sky. Both of them were expert archers. Their mother, Leto, was very, very fierce, and she taught them how to protect themselves, and they did a good job. Hera sent monsters after Leto to try to kill her, and her children, while they were still babies, were able to slay these monsters and protect their mother. And all three of them fought on the side of Troy in the Trojan War. It's fitting that NASA's two programs to send human beings away from the Earth for the first time are named after these twins. Apollo took place in the late 1960s and the early 1970s, and now that we're going back to the moon, they've named it after Artemis, which is probably even more fitting because we are in fact going to the moon. But You might also know that the spacecraft that the astronauts are traveling in is called Orion. And you might wonder, why did they even pick that? What does that have to do with Artemis? And actually quite a lot. There's a whole bunch of stories about Artemis and Orion, and that's what I thought I would share with you this evening. Orion is one of the better known constellations in the night sky. It's the one with the 3 stars that make up his belt and the nebula that hangs down for the scabbard. And he's absolutely enormous, which makes sense because he was a giant. He was the son of a Minoan princess and Poseidon, the sea god. Artemis and Orion have a sad history. It's, unfortunately, no matter how many ways their story was told, it never ended very well for poor Orion. But I'm happy to say that now NASA is giving these 2 mythological hunters the happy ending maybe we always hoped for. In the Odyssey, which was written by Homer about 2,800 years ago, it said that Artemis visited Orion with her gentle shafts, which is a poetic way to say that she shot him, because she resented the fact that the dawn goddess Eos had chosen Orion as her husband. Pseudo-Apollodorus, who was a Roman writer, he wrote about 1,800 years ago, and he said that Artemis killed Orion after he challenged her to a discus competition, and she was, I guess, affronted by that. Seems like a bit of an overreaction, but she's a goddess. She can do what she wants. And then there's other versions of the story that say that Orion got too forceful with Artemis, or that he went after another maiden, and so that's why he was killed. But there are tales where Orion and Artemis are very good friends. They're both hunters, so it's natural that they would end up enjoying spending time together in the wilderness. Hesiod wrote at about the same time as Homer, so 2,800 years ago. And he's the one who said that Orion was the son of Euryale. I don't know how to say that. That's hard to say. Euryale, the daughter of King Minos of Crete. This is the guy who, with the Minotaur and all of that. And then Poseidon was Orion's father. And that Poseidon gave his son the gift of being able to walk upon the waves as if it were the dry land. And so while he's hanging out in his mother's homeland on the island of Crete, Orion loved to go hunting with Artemis and Leto, and they really enjoyed his company. He was handsome, he was a good hunter, he was a lot of just fun to hang out with, just a really good camping buddy, right? He made a threat or a boast that he could kill every animal on the face of the earth. And it would appear that the earth goddess Gaia has absolutely no sense of humor, because instead of just seeing this as an idle boast, she took him quite seriously. And as she considered all living things on the earth to be her children, she was not okay with the idea of all of them being slain. So she sent Scorpio, a monstrously giant scorpion, to go after Orion, and the monster stung the hunter and killed him. So Artemis and Leto were pretty broken up about this because their hunting buddy was now dead. So they were so grieved that they asked Zeus, who they were always on very good terms with. So Zeus and Leto were always kind of connected in some way, and Artemis absolutely had her dad just wrapped around her finger. He gave her anything she asked for. So they said, please, can we put Orion among the stars on account of his manliness? And the scorpion was also placed there so that the whole world would know what happened. Now, about 1,000 years after that story, there's a writer named Pseudo-Hyginus, and he repeated the story, but he added that Zeus created the constellations because he admired the hunting skill of not just Orion, but also the scorpion. He also wanted to put them in the sky to remind guys that being boastful, getting a little too big for your britches, is not very good for you. So having that up in the stars, like, guys, be confident, have your swagger, but, don't take it too far. The Roman poet Ovid said that Orion was a loyal guardian of Artemis, and that he served her very faithfully and always wanted to protect her, and that Scorpio, in fact, came to attack her. So the scorpion was coming up and he was ready to sting the goddess, and Orion stepped in the way and took the sting for her. And so Leto was so grateful that her daughter had been saved that she was the one who actually put him among the stars and turned him into the constellation. So it's interesting that in that version of the story, the goddess is the one with the power. They don't have to go to Zeus to turn Orion into the stars. The most interesting version of this tale, though, comes once again from Pseudo-Hyginus. He was a Roman mythologist, but he also studied constellations, and he offered this alternate version, which was written by Istrus, who was a poet who lived in Alexandria. And Orion in this tale is once again a very handsome hunter, and Artemis came to love him. This is what makes this so unusual, because this is the goddess who asked her father for the gift to always remain a maiden and never have to be with a man, and she was ready to marry him. And this really ticked off her brother Apollo, which is super hypocritical because Apollo chased anything with two X chromosomes, and he took it really badly. He scolded his sister and reminded her of her oath to forever remain a maiden, but it didn't work. You cannot boss Artemis around. This is not going to work. So one day, Apollo saw Orion as he was swimming in the sea, and he was completely submerged in the water except for the top of his head, and he was just enjoying a nice swim, clearly not using the powers that Poseidon had given him to walk on water, but enjoying the sea. And that makes sense since his mother came from an island and his father's the sea god. So only his head is visible above the water, and Apollo sees this. He's got really good vision, and he says to his sister, "Hey, I bet you can't hit that rock over there with your arrow." And Artemis loves a challenge. She's always eager to prove her skill as an archer, so she bends her bow and shoots an arrow and strikes, and she strikes true. And when she realizes what has happened, she is both very grieved and very, very furious. So she's shot her own love because her brother tricked her because he didn't like her boyfriend. And so she mourned his death with many tears and placed her love among the stars. So once again, she's the one who turns Orion into a constellation. The postscript to this story is that later on Artemis slew Apollo's love Coronis to get her revenge. So you can see in all these different versions of this story, none of the endings are very happy. It always ends really badly for poor Orion. But that's kind of where I like the fact that NASA has named the actual spacecraft. So the mission is called Artemis, these missions that will take people back to the moon, but the actual spaceship is called Orion. And so once again, you've got Artemis and Orion teamed up in the heavens, working together, helping human beings explore the last true wilderness that we have access to, space, the true wild, where it is dangerous, it is unknown. I think it's also very fitting that there is, for the first time, a woman on board a spacecraft headed to the moon. And, you know, although Artemis wasn't very big on technology, I think that it still fits with her to... This is going into the wild, this is exploration, this is taking on danger, and we're doing that moonshot, you know, maybe not with a bow and arrow, but with a really powerful rocket and some very brave and creative people at NASA, and in this trip, the Canadian Space Agency as well. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed some of those tales. Maybe a little less structured than our usual ones, since most of these stories about Greek gods tend to come down in little fragments. They'll just be like a paragraph thrown into a larger story here and there. Yes, my darling?
I have old Crocs.
Okay, well that's all right. And my daughters have had fun playing while we're doing all this. And now I will enjoy my delicious marshmallow as the sky grows dark and the moon comes out, and I can look up there and think, somewhere up there, there are 4 human beings, and I can't wait to see what they do next. Thanks for listening.